Hello, I'm back like I never left. This is a continuation of my previous video on some of the things that I wish I knew in my 20s and my early 30s that could have helped me advance my career and just advance my life generally. If you're new here, welcome. And for all my OGs and returning subscribers, welcome back. I remain Ola, your DEI bestie, and you already know what we do here. We keep it real, unpacking all things diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it is my sincere hope that you leave every video on this channel with inspiration to co-create a more inclusive and equitable world. The next thing that I wish I knew in my 20s and early 30s is not being in a hurry to specialize in my career. So I look back at various phases of my career, especially in my 20s, and I wish I was more intentional, more circumspect. I wish I took more time before deciding on specializations in my career. What I've realized is that as you grow, especially in your 20s, your growth is exponential. So as you grow, you learn more about yourself. Your self-awareness and just awareness of the world really increases. Your interests change, and the world also evolves. The world as you know it also evolves. And it's important for your career to evolve along with it. I realized that it would have been highly beneficial for my career for me to explore a lot, for me to use my 20s to go in as many different directions as I want. And some people may disagree. Let me know if you disagree. I'll be very, very happy to hear your perspective. However, personally, I think that I would have benefited a whole lot from being a generalist and really just exploring different things, going in different directions. I turned down a few opportunities, some tech-related opportunities, for instance, some compliance-related opportunities, mainly because I felt like my career was not going to go in that direction. But I do see that it would have been valuable for me to pick up those skills. I would have benefited a lot from knowing a little about everything, right? Like I said in my previous video, I have no regrets. I just think that it would have been a better way to approach my career as a woman. It would have set me up for way more success if I had taken time to explore and not box myself and label myself too much very early in my career. Another thing I wish I knew in my 20s and early 30s is that balance is a mirage. Yes, I said what I said. You know, there's this famous question that women who are high-flying and successful, and also women who have families, often get, particularly when they're on panels, when they're inspiring other women, or when they're just speaking about their work. There's that question of, oh, how do you balance family life and career? Well, my answer to that question now, as a fully formed woman, is that there's nothing like balance. There's always a price for everything you decide to do. For everything you invest your energy in, you're making a decision to divest your energy from something else. So the day that you show up at work as a star employee or as an amazing entrepreneur who's running their business excellently and making profits, that is some days, some nights, some moments, maybe weeks and months even of attention away from other things that matter to you. And that could be your personal development, that could be your family, that could be childbirth, that could be motherhood, that could be being a child, a brother, a sister, a friend. I do think that we should be more honest about that. Yes, you can have it all, but you cannot have it all at once. And so I have made peace with that. I have decided to prioritize joy, and I wish that I knew this early on in my 20s and early 30s, because I would not have spent my energy chasing balance. I would have just, showed up and accepted that I was making sacrifices and just decide what sacrifice is worth making. I wouldn't have bothered myself pursuing balance, because I think that balance is a huge mirage that you can never achieve. You show up, you do your best, you make the sacrifices you think are worth it, and you leave the rest. Another important thing that I wish I knew back then is that financial freedom should be a priority. And I get it. Many times, people in their 20s are still struggling. Your 20s are your formative years, really, where you're probably still earning income that is, minimum. You're pursuing learning and all of that. However, I wish that I became financially savvy in my 20s and my early 30s. With the level of knowledge that I have on investments and personal finance, I do know that I wasted a lot of years. I wasted a lot of effort that I could have channeled towards crafting a financially free future for myself and for, my family, my children, those coming after me. And I don't necessarily feel regret, but I do wish that I knew to start investing however little, doing it consistently, however boring it could have been, doing it consistently and just locking it in. It would have made a whole lot of difference. And I see that some of my financial goals would have been met faster, way faster, if I had started pursuing them in my 20s. So yeah, if you're in your 20s, your early 30s, start learning about personal finance, start investing, start putting all your financial ducks in a row, because it's never too early. It's never too early to start. Like finances, always pursue that as early as possible. It always makes a difference, trust me. And that brings me to the next point. One thing I wish I knew very clearly in my 20s and early 30s is that nobody is coming to save me. Nobody's coming to save me from the decisions I make. My life is entirely in my hands with the help of God, but my life is in my hands. One thing that I always did whenever I wanted to make critical decisions in my 20s and early 30s was to really depend on what people around me thought, especially people that I respected at that time, people that I felt were doing it right. But one thing I did not realize is that people would only advise you or guide you as far as they know. People cannot give what they do not have. So they would advise you often from a good place, but from their own limited knowledge and their own limited worldview. And the mistake I made was not to fully own my decisions, such that sometimes when I followed people's guidance and the decision did not quite pan out the way that I wanted, I ended up, blaming them, maybe silently, not aloud, but like blaming them for how the decision went, how that particular critical decision went. And now I realize that it was a really wrong approach. And in my 20s, I would have benefited a lot from really owning my decisions and taking the bull by the horn and just being very intentional about my life, knowing that my life is in my hands. Whether good or bad, nobody's coming to save you from it. You bear the consequence of every decision you make, every mistake you make, every success. It's all going to be on you. No pressure, but that awareness is very important. And that awareness is super, super transformative, because when you know that the buck stops at you, it ends at your doorstep, then you can make decisions with more clarity and more ownership. Another thing I really wish I knew in my 20s and early 30s is to test everything I believe. Now that I have gained a few more years behind me, I realized that changing your mind is a good thing. I realized that as much as possible, exposing your beliefs, exposing your assumptions to criticism, to reflection is really helpful for you as a person. A sign of growth and intelligence really is how many times you've allowed yourself consume new information, relate with people who think differently, who see life differently, who have experienced things differently. A sign of growth and wisdom is to gravitate towards this and just open yourself up to new learning. It's very important to understand that you could be wrong. Even if you've held a particular belief or you've assumed something for as many years as possible, you could still be wrong. It's possible that you're wrong. You're just wrong. And that is okay. And holding on to certain assumptions or ways of doing things simply because you do not want to change your mind will not help. It's really helpful to open yourself up to new perspectives and challenge yourself. Challenge yourself to move to another side, to think in another manner as much as possible. Finally, and perhaps the most important thing that I wish I knew in my 20s and my early 30s is to make healing a priority. And I say this because we carry a lot of experiences, good and bad, a lot of memories, a lot of entanglements through our childhood, through our teenage years, and our 20s and early 30s even is when we see the manifestations of all of these things that we've carried. Some of us might even carry trauma and some experiences that are just, heavy within ourselves. And because your 20s are the years where you make very critical, life-changing decisions, and even your early 30s, I would say, when you make very critical decisions, it's important that you take time to heal, to overcome trauma, to take off some of this load, some of this weight that is heavy within you. Because otherwise, you would end up bleeding on others, looking at various situations in life, making critical decisions through the lens of your trauma and from a place of pain and hurt. So it's really important that you do the work, really do the work of overcoming trauma, of healing, true healing, and becoming whole. I think that's a journey that never ends. We all have various stages of healing and recovery to do at various stages of our lives. But it's really important, I've seen, to take out time to go to therapy if you need to talk to people, to learn more about the trauma that you've experienced, to explore different healthy and helpful ways of healing so that you can live a wholesome life in your 20s, your 30s, and far beyond. I would say that that is one of the greatest gifts that you can give yourself in your 20s and your early 30s, to at least begin the work of healing. Thank you all so much for joining. I really hope that you've picked one thing or two. As always, I'm happy to hear if you have any additional nuggets to share, any tips or tricks that you wish that you knew in your 20s or early 30s, or even tips that helped you navigate your 20s and early 30s in a way that contributed to your growth. Thank you all once again. See you in the next video.